let's find some great books for you to read. Now, I don't normally really get hyped up about new releases, but I don't know why this year I feel like there are quite a few new releases that seem really good to me. And there is even one that I actually broke down and actually bought it. It doesn't come out until March, but I already pre-ordered it. This is something I don't normally do, but I thought it would be fun to create a video of some of the new releases that I'm excited about, and maybe you can get excited about them too. So this first book, Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall, this is the one that I am so excited about. I've heard so many, book podcasters and people who get their hands on these books early say that this is already their favorite book of 2025. It's described as literary fiction. It is a thriller. It is a love story. It is supposed to be propulsive as well as suffused with meaning. Basically what happens is there is a woman who is happily married with a farmer. They are living in her hometown, and then one day she comes into contact with a man who she used to be in love with. This was her original love, her long lost love, who moved away and became a famous author, and now he's back with his young son. And then basically from there, a whole host of things happens. Somebody gets murdered. I don't know who. But anyways, there's just so much hype about this book, and it sounds like something that I would really like, especially because it's described as literary fiction. So I broke down and bought it. I will let you know eventually if I like it, but I'm curious, comment below, is this something that you would actually buy? A lot of times with new releases, I just wait till I can get them from the library. I don't care if I read them right away. But this one hooked me enough to buy it. Oh, and then before we move on to some other ones, I did want to quickly list just a few books that are being published this year by some really famous authors. These aren't books that I'm really interested in reading. They're a little bit too pop fiction-y for me, but I will list them here in case there is one of your favorite authors on here. Emily Henry has a new one, Great Big Beautiful. R.F. Kuang has a new one, Calabasas. Victoria Schwab has a new one, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. Abby Jimenez has a new one, Say You'll Remember Me, and Taylor Jenkins Reid has a new one, Atmosphere. So yeah, I just wanted to list those there in case you happen to have an author that you really like who's coming out with a book this year. So a next new release that I'm very much looking forward to is the Hunger Games prequel that talks about Haymitch. Haymitch's Hunger Games. This is Sunrise on the Reaping. I didn't really like the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which was the President Snow prequel, but I will, look beyond that just for Haymitch, just because I love the Hunger Games so much. I guess we'll see what happens. Now, I will say for these new releases, there actually isn't much historical fiction on this list that I'm making right now. I don't know why, just these other books, they just seemed more interesting to me. But this next one, Disillusion by Nicholas Binge. So this is described as a book that, if you like somebody like Blake Crouch, you'll probably like this book. I really like Blake Crouch, so I thought, this one, it sounds like something I would like to read. But basically, it is about a woman who her husband is suffering from Alzheimer's, and she's been taking care of him for the past 10 years. And then one day, a stranger mysteriously shows up and he says, you know what, your husband actually isn't suffering from Alzheimer's. So then, what falls from that is a whole host of things, and apparently, all of human history is at stake here. Anyways, it sounds interesting and propulsive, and I think eventually I probably will read this one this year. This next one, The River Has Roots by Amal El-Matar. So again, this is one that I feel like I wouldn't normally be interested in this sort of story, but I guess what I've heard about it just kind of sucked me in. So Amal El-Matar, she's actually the co-writer on the very popular book, This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is actually a Hugo winner. I haven't read this book, and I've heard it get mixed reviews. It's kind of one of those books that either you love it or you hate it. But this particular book, this is her debut novel as, just a novelist herself. And it is a retelling of a fairy tale. It's about two sisters, and I guess in the original fairy tale, the two sisters were competing against each other for the love of a particular man. Well, in this one, she retells it where one of the sisters rejects a very dangerous man, and then sort of what happens from there. I guess the reason she decided to write it is because when she originally, I don't know what fairy tale she's retelling, but I guess when she originally heard about this fairy tale, because she loves her sister so much, she just couldn't understand how sisters could do that to each other, so she wanted to rewrite it in her perspective. So anyways, it just sounded super interesting to me, so I will read this one this year. The next one, The Strange Case of Jane O by Karen Thompson Walker. So this is described as a speculative mystery. Rivalry. So apparently there's a woman, Jane, and she starts having these strange cases of memory loss. And then she starts working with a psychiatrist, and then both of them start to question what is even reality. I mean, I guess she's having these visions of a man who was killed 20 years ago. So this is dubbed as a mesmerizing literary puzzle. It just sounds super interesting to me, so I probably will end up reading this one as well. Next one, Dream State by Eric Puchner. So this is a story about three friends, and it takes place in Montana. I guess it's sort of an ode to the American West. As far as I can gather, it is a love triangle, essentially what's going on here. So this woman, Cece, she's going to get married to a man named Charlie, and Charlie has asked his best friend to officiate the wedding. At first, Cece really doesn't like Garrett, but then, you know, things start to unfold. This is supposed to be a sweeping, expansive epic that covers 50 years of these people's life, and so not only do you learn about, you know, their own decisions and how it affects them, but also how it affects their children. Sounds super interesting to me, so I look forward to picking this up sometime this year. Sometime. Maybe when the library can get it to me. This next one, Penitence by Kristen Cavall. So this novel is described as something that someone who likes Celeste Ng or Anne Patchett might like this novel. I like both of those authors, so it sounded, you know, intriguing to me just from that perspective. Essentially what is happening in this book is there is a murder that occurs in the home of a couple. I don't exactly know anything beyond that other than they have to enlist the help of a particular lawyer, but the lawyer happens to be the mother of the woman's first love. Interestingly, I'm sensing a theme here in these new releases, like where are all these love triangles coming from? I always think it's interesting in whenever there are, you know, a bunch of new releases in a year and how sometimes there just seems to be like a theme that's running through so many of them. I feel like this is a theme, like a love triangle theme. But I'd like to try this one this year, and let me know in the comments below if you would too. This next one is actually a nonfiction book. It's called Save Our Souls by Matthew Pearl. It is actually the true story of a family that is shipwrecked on an island. I believe this occurs in 1887. So they're shipwrecked on an island, and there is a mysterious man who lives on this island. And as you read on in the story, you see that there might be something, you know, a little bit darker about this man than what you initially thought. So this sounds right up my alley in terms of narrative nonfiction, you know, a gripping page turner. It's one of those books where truth is stranger than fiction. The next one is We Do Not Part by Han Kang. So the reason why this one caught my eye is because it talks about a forgotten, very dark aspect of Korean history. And I don't know why. I mean, I feel like Korean history is very interesting to me. It's just a part of history that I've always wanted to learn about, which is why I'm attracted to this particular book. But it begins when there is a woman who is in the hospital, and she calls her friend and she says, "You've got to help me save my beloved pet, a white bird. There's a snowstorm coming and the bird is going to die if you don't get it because I'm in the hospital and I can't do anything about it." And then the story sort of evolves from there, at least as far as I can tell. And then somehow that event leads us into the story about this particularly dark period of Korean history. So anyways, sounds super interesting to me, and I look forward to reading it sometime this year. And this last one is The Original Daughter by Jeremiah Way. So this is a story of sibling rivalry, two siblings in Singapore. Genevieve was the original daughter, and then eventually she comes to discover that she actually has a sister. So this story is basically the story of their lives, of the need to always be achieving and eventually a betrayal by one of the sisters. So it's a story of, you know, what is ultimately really important in life. Well, anyways, I hope some of those new releases sound interesting to you. Again, I don't typically get hyped up about new releases. You know, usually I'll get to them eventually, maybe even a couple years later, whenever they happen to be ready at the library. But these particular books, they kind of really piqued my interest this year. So let me know in the comments down below if any of them sound interesting to you. And as always, happy reading.